to open the public hearing to amend Chapter 215 zoning of the town code. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. I'm going to invite Max to explain a little bit of what we're looking to do and exploring for this zone change.
Certainly, thank you, Supervisor. So, I'm here tonight because you are entertaining a draft local law that would amend the zoning to clarify and change some provisions regarding mixed uses in the BU zoning district. Mixed uses in the BU zoning district as a use was added after the 2013 master plan amendment. And the primary purpose of that code was to allow people who own stores or businesses in the BU district who had seen significant increases in real property taxes due to the Myron settlement to be able to weather the increases by potentially adding apartments to the upper stories. There's a lot of buildings in Stony Point that are single-story in downtown. The BU district encompasses much of the Route 9W corridor, and this is one strategy that was envisioned for that purpose. Additionally, there was initial discussions about a town center somewhere being created in town. At the time, back in 2013, there was no Tractor Supply store. There was no Aldi's in town, and that plaza had lain vacant for some time. And there was some idea that that could potentially be a potential town center area. Also, the intersection of North Main and Liberty Drive was seen as a potential area. But these were just preliminary issues that were supposed to be further investigated as it went down the road. But this was seen as a vehicle that might also allow for that type of future development. Recently, we've had an experience where somebody came in and wanted to build new construction using this mixed-use BU zoning district special use permit. It required going to the zoning board for interpretations because it wasn't clear at all the way it's currently constructed. And additionally, I think that it was the consensus of most people on the planning board that the resulting development, the way it was crafted, and the way that it could be interpreted would lead to something that was out of character with the prevailing character of the town. So really what these amendments are intended to do is to serve that original intent and clarify those provisions. We could say maybe close some loopholes where it allowed or it opened the door to development that clearly wasn't the intent of the original law as it was adopted. So that's the essential of what's being proposed. Some of the changes are it's being clarified that the FAR, or floor area ratio, of the underlying BU district applies to the building. That the planning board under certain circumstances is allowed to increase that. Many of the commercial buildings around town are already built to the maximum. So if you want to allow a second story of apartments, you would have to do that. But the problem comes again when somebody comes in with a large piece of land, new construction, that FAR allows a building that's far out of character with the community. Other clarifications have to do with height limitations, clarifying that those height limitations do apply to these buildings at 25 to 35 feet, and that it was never intended that these could go up to 45 feet. There's also provisions here that clarify apartment size, both minimum and maximum. Minimum so that there's a certain quality of apartment as a minimum. Maximum to make sure people aren't trying to loophole and call things dens and offices when they're really intended to be bedrooms. There are provisions that talk about the way the code is currently written. It actually encourages larger apartments, 3 bedrooms, 4 bedrooms, and this being sort of an avenue to promoting affordable housing in the town and housing for seniors and young professionals. There's going to be tied to parking requirements based on the number of bedrooms, and the bedroom mix is going to be incentivized to encourage something around a 2-bedroom average, and also to tie the number of bedrooms to the lot area so that you don't end up with unintendedly high densities. That's really the gist of it. There's a couple of other minor changes proposed in here, but that's overall the general purpose behind these amendments.
I think, in 2013, during that master plan,
none of the board members were on the board at that time. I remember reading about it. I remember in different municipalities, they saw something in Clarkstown, but I hope it wasn't their intention to drastically change the character of Stony Point with, several large floors or different things. And I don't know what their intentions were, but I do know what the residents of Stony Point and what would conform with our historic character downtown Stony Point, where we want to keep it small Stony Point, but there is definitely a need. When I talk to senior citizens, a need for smaller apartments for seniors to live in. I know with my old family members, I have a young daughter when she was looking for apartments and different things, and it's really something that's not attractable. So I think development, if done right, would suit Stony Point. And I just want to say, what we're looking at is the zoning for all the BU district. This is not for one specific area or one specific project. I just have to be clear on that. Okay? So with that, I'm going to open the hearing. It's open. Would anybody like to comment? Mr. George Potanovic Jr.
Thank you, Supervisor, members of the board. This is on, right? George Potanovic, 597 Oak Hazel Road, and President of Spades. I think this is an improvement, certainly, over what was done. I think there's couple of questions that I have regarding some of the wording, but I think overall this is certainly an improvement over the original zoning for the BU district. So I'd just like to point out to you a couple of specifics from the paper, if you have a copy and you want to look at it. On page 2, at the top, residential mixed-use building. In the BU zoning district was crossed out, but this does apply to the BU zoning district, right? So in other words,
That is correct.
okay, so that's, I wasn't sure why it was crossed out there, but it shows it in other places. The parking requirements, I think, is a big improvement because many times our zoning allows a certain amount of development based on parking availability. And that was a problem with the application that came before the board, this 111 South Liberty. They really didn't have the room for the parking, and yet they were still trying to build a large number of units. So I think it's good that you're reassessing the number of parking spaces per unit. It went from 2 to now this 1.5 for a single apartment, and then 0.5 for additional. So it seems to fit in well, and especially that you have a maximum of 12 units per acre. I think that's the big improvement. The number of units per acre overall would be less. So in the case of so people know, in the case of 111 South Liberty, we were talking 80-something units, and I think that this would work out according to the new zoning more like around 40, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was about 4 acres of land. Does that sound right, Max?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's significantly less. half of what would have been proposed. There's an improvement right there. Because I think we weren't against the idea of building something there, but the size of it was so big. I think that was the problem.
Space was on the original
No,
committee.
you said that before.
No, space was. I didn't say you. Space was on the original committee
Yeah.
that did this kind of zoning. Was that their intention to allow?
That was not true. So you show me that. I went over the original, I have a copy of the master plan, and the people that are, if you want to do it now, you can. But I looked over it, and certainly I was
No,
not.
I was
Yeah.
wondering what.
Well, I'm just correcting you, that's all. Yeah. So I had nothing to do with that, except it sounded like a good idea, like you said, the idea of allowing retail stores to put apartments above it. I mean, people used to do that before World War II. Look at Haverstraw. Look at the way they put the stores and have apartments above it. People can live near where they shop and stuff. They don't have to get in their cars. So it made a lot of sense to approach something like that. I don't know. Stony Point had already been built out there quite a bit. Like you say, some of the larger retail stores weren't even built yet. But it was an idea. It wasn't a bad idea, but I think the implementation of it in terms of how the wording in the zoning was not obviously. And sometimes you don't get a chance to see what the zoning is going to look like until somebody comes in with an application. This is our first application for zoning that was almost 10 years old, right? This was 2013, and the application came in probably, 8 years into that, or almost 10 years into that. So we didn't get a chance to see what was brought forward to the town based on that zoning until they came through with the project. And then that zoning was obviously not only to people in Stony Point, the Rockland County Planning Department and Department of Transportation and others saw it as being an overuse of the property. So that's important in the zoning, that we can project what might come in the door. So hopefully this will do that. Why are we allowing a recreation on the roof? I guess that second page at the bottom, we talked about originally there was a requirement for 200 square feet of unpaved outdoor recreation.
We're not, George, I'm going to cut you off. We're not talking about a specific project here.
Right. But why are we considering?
We're not talking about a specific project. I think you understand.
Yeah, but I'm asking, then why are we keeping that in where we would require 200 feet of square feet?
The recommendation is to change that.
Oh, it's a change. But it still says that you could put it on the roof, right? Did I read that wrong?
Not by right.
Okay, but I mean, it's still allowable. I never understood why the recreational space was allowed on the roof, and I don't think I'd be in favor of seeing that necessarily. Have you seen that before? Recreational space on a roof? That's the top of page 3, to allow roof recreation. Is that, I thought the purpose of having recreation for kids was to have it outside. It was supposed to be on unpaved ground, according to the original zoning, so maybe that should be re-examined. No more than 25% of units shall contain 3 or more bedrooms, as Max was pointing out. The emphasis here is on 1 and 2 bedrooms, which is great, and the average number would be less than what it would be today under the current zoning. And there's no mention of maximum floor height or maximum building height, but does that fit into the town's code other places where, is that 45 feet? Or
25 to 35.
so that's a maximum?
It's the maximum for the rest of the BU district.
Oh, okay.
The loophole was that it didn't specify that you couldn't do use group O, which is for offices.
Oh, okay, gotcha. So if someone were to, one of the things you're mentioning here, I was looking at a 3-story apartment, right, that must have only single bedrooms on the 3rd floor. If we didn't have an elevator, I guess you're saying that you want to make it accessible, so it has to have an elevator, but if it doesn't have an elevator, the 3rd floor would just have single, yeah. But the building height still would only be able to be 35 feet. Okay, good. All right, that sounds good. Okay. Now why, then on the next page, where it talks about at least 50% of the first story above grade is sort of on the first third of the next page. The structure, I guess it's metal or something. Why do you use the date of September 12th, 2013?
Well, say
That was the original.
Adoption of the amendment to the comp plan, that's on page 5. of
Okay,
our-
yeah.
And page 3 of the law.
That was the original comp plan that we're talking about?
No, that's the amendment to the comp plan. The original was 1995.
Right.
We amended it in 2013.
Right, that was an amendment, okay. Okay. But you're giving people who had property at that point? So you maybe could explain that.
Yeah, so I kind of alluded it to in my preamble here, which is one of the purposes of this law is to allow people who have single-story commercial properties, you know, just for an example, I guess what used to be Lynch's now is the Mexican restaurant, right? Somebody wanted to put 1 or 2 stories of apartments above that. That building is already built out to the maximum FAR. So in order to allow for a story of residential, you have to waive the FAR. But you don't want to let somebody come in on a greenfield site and build something at very high FAR, because this was the intent, right, to allow existing buildings to accommodate more.
Right.
If you're going to design something out of the box that's mixed use, you don't want to give that relief. They have to meet the FAR, and they're just going to have more green space for them.
I see.
Right.
Okay.
So that's the principle. I just wanted to answer 2 other things. We did have 2 applications for this before the recent one, and those were what it was intended for, where we had a law office who wanted to put apartments above. They got approved by the planning board. They never built it.
Oh.
And I think there was one other. And actually, we have one that just went in 80. I think it's 86 North Liberty Drive. Just constructed up near Thompson's Cove, where they have an office, walk-in office on the ground floor,
Next to the fireside.
an apartment right next to the
Next to the
fire.
fireside restaurant.
Oh,
We
yeah,
don't
that's
run
very
a
nice.
shop.
Have the open window in front?
Yep.
Yeah, I think that was the intention when
Yes.
they did this original zoning for something like that.
Right, yeah, I'm sure, yeah.
And the last question that I just want to answer is why do we take the BU district off? Is originally we didn't have mixed uses listed in the BU table. It was only listed in the special use permits. So now we're putting this as a listed use in the BU table. That's the last element of the code.
Okay.
And therefore we don't need to have it in the title of the special permit.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Thank you. Appreciate it. So this is a type 1 action if applied, right? So that means it requires a full EIS and a public hearing?
This is a type 1 action. It does not require a full EIS.
Oh, it doesn't fully, but
No.
not a full EIS.
No, and frankly, these being clarifications and
Oh,
minor
the zoning
modifications,
doesn't require it, but the
Correct.
project itself would, no? Or-
there is no project.
I'm sorry.
There is no project before the town.
Not now.
Not now. If somebody came in, the decision on whether it would require an EIS would lay with the planning board.
I say, would it be determined based on the size of the project?
Correct.
Okay, gotcha. All right, good. I just want to also, I'm using my time, I wanted to also read a letter. I was sent a letter from someone who couldn't make it to the meeting tonight because of the snow. So I'd just like to read that, it's very brief. That's Jim Kraus. So he writes to the Stony Point Town Board, good evening. I intended to join you at tonight's meeting, but I live in an old house with a long snow-covered driveway, which I have difficulty clearing to get our car out of it, especially at 80 years old, and does not shovel as quickly as I did in past years. After reading rather quickly the proposed zoning changes, I believe they are highly beneficial amendments to our existing mixed-use zoning provisions. The restrictions to the maximum of 12 units per acre, improved parking allocations, and expanded recreational spaces are clear improvements. I commend the board on being responsive to our local citizens' outcry over the badly designed, excessively dense development now subject to an Article 78 by moving to improve our residential zoning. As a person who has resided in Stony Point for more than 50 years, in a home owned by my family for 100 years, I have witnessed the dramatic changes in our community. Obviously, I support these proposed zoning changes and appreciate the opportunity to address you in this letter, Jim Kraus. Okay, thank you very much for your attention. I appreciate it.
Is there anybody else who would like to speak?
Hi,
Just state your name for the record.
Joseph Pascal. I happen to represent 111 South Liberty.
I just want to be clear, this zone change is not about 111. I know Mr. Potanovic puts that out, but this is just upgrading our BU zoning.
I do not believe that, but if you want to say it for the record, that's fine. We all know that this is about 111 South Liberty. This came up
That's
when
not correct.
This came up after the public outcry, just like his letter said. Okay,
He has a habit of putting things out that are not always accurate,
Mr.
in my
Supervisor,
opinion.
let's call it ace and ace. This is the ace of the town's whole, and they're used to it. That is an ace. Only reason I came up, and I wasn't planning to be confrontational with you, but when I walk up and you tell me what something is, after you tell me what people's intent was, when everybody says we don't know their intent, but this had to be their intent, this is about 111 South Liberty. Okay, now,
I will not agree with that.
And I'll dispute that as well, Supervisor.
I've seen people put that out. I know one individual who likes to put things like that out, so I don't know, it's for attention, but that is not what the purpose of this is.
is this the first meeting on this local law?
Correct,
And it's already drafted?
correct.
And there was no discussion prior to it being drafted?
There was discussion with me and the town planner, yes.
But there was no open meetings
So
discussion?
that's what this is. You're here at the first open meeting.
Yes, but it's already after it's been drafted. It's been drafted, and all of a sudden, it's a fait accompli, but it doesn't have anything to do with 111 South Liberty. Yes.
Sir, that's why we have the hearing, so we can hear people. It's
I
drafted,
understand,
so
but-
certainly there could be some changes
But
after the fact that
but
we
it's
listen to them.
clearly being pursued in violation of the open meetings law.
Okay, thank you.
Sir, if I may, I'm here as the town's attorney for the evening. I'm covering for Mr. Nugent from Fair Commission McCartney. It's perfectly valid the way this has been presented. It's typical for municipalities to ask their planners or the legal professionals to prepare a proposal of a law. And then before it's actually adopted, there's a public hearing, and that's what this is. This is the public's opportunity to be
I
heard.
have a discussion with Brian, maybe he and I will disagree, but we've had this discussion before, there's no question about it, that this is a violation of the open meetings.
Absolutely not. I disagree.
I ultimately presume the court will decide that. But again, the only reason I came up was not to be confrontational, was to ask, since I just learned about this very recently, is to ask that the public hearing stay open for one more time.
We are planning on keeping the public hearing,
Okay, because
especially with the weather.
I would like to be able to prepare a written response,
Okay.
and this way we can make sure everything is on the record.
Okay.
Okay, that was what I came up to say before.
Okay.
People are being clairvoyant as to other people's intents when they weren't around.
I understand.
Okay, have a good day.
You too, thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to speak? And seeing nobody, I'm going to make a motion to continue the public hearing for our next town board meeting, which is, just want to make sure I have it dead, February 27th, here in this meeting room at 7 p.m.
I'll second that.
Motion and second, all in favor? Aye. Motion carries.